Howdy, 9 o'clock Sunday evening. I am Janet Callahan, and this is The Witch is In. Hopefully this works tonight. I am still without a computer, so I'm working from my phone. Yeah, that's not gonna work. Alright, so, no selfie light for me. Anyway, no lights, barely a camera, whatever. Alright. Well, that's fun. So anyway, say hi if you're watching. Let me know you're out there. I really ought to get better at planning ahead what I'm going to say in these. But, that's alright. If you guys have questions, go ahead and post questions and I will talk about them as time goes by, or as we're led to do so. So one of the things that I wanted to talk about tonight is my current little pet peeve, which is back in the early 2000s, I had, when I was doing Spiral Scouts and I was involved in some Pagan Community Center stuff here, which eventually fell through, there were all these huge projects. There were big library projects. Cherry Hill Seminary started, Spiral Scouts started. There was the whole fight to get pentacles on gravestones in federal cemeteries, VA cemeteries. There were all of these ideas floating around that people were working on. All of these big ideas, right? There was a lot of talk, serious talk about intentional communities. There was talk about pagan-owned mundane businesses and referring people to those businesses. There was there were books being written about pagan homeschooling and like big picture pagan parenting and how to run a coven and how to run a church, right? A congregational style church. There were a million ideas out there. So the book Pagan Homeschooling is now out of print. The other day, the cheapest I could find it was $432. I saw listings for $1,000. Nobody's going to pay that for that book. But it is literally the only book out there on pagan homeschooling. And it's not even that good of a book on pagan homeschooling. A big portion of the book is about how the author Kristen Madden, grew up in a pagan family and was homeschooled. And considering it's 20 years old, I really feel like it needs to be updated or something along those lines, because it doesn't actually apply to anything that's going on today, really. There were just so many options and so many things going on, right? Now, like when the recession hit in 2008, a lot of the community centers closed because they just couldn't keep the doors open. Here in Detroit, we have Pagan Pathways Temple, which is currently closed due to COVID, but was closed before that because their roof literally fell in. They can't get enough donations to keep a roof over their head, quite literally. Every once in a while, people come up in one of the pagan parenting groups and say, oh, well, are there any online pagan schools? And everybody's like, no, that's a crazy idea. Nobody would ever do that. Well, you know what? There was. From about 2000 till about 2010, 2011, somewhere in there was an online parochial school taught by about 50-50 mix of certified teachers and parents who had homeschooled for many, many years. They acted as a cover school or an umbrella school. Some of you will be familiar with that term, but in some states, I'm not even sure this is necessary anymore, but in some states, it used to be the only way you could homeschool was if you were enrolled in a real school, which is to say, a school somewhere that supposedly was keeping an eye on what you were doing and making sure you were actually teaching your kid. And most of them were Christian churches running these things, with varying levels of supervision. But these folks had a clergy program, had charity programs, outreach programs to homeless people, and they had a school. Their school sold their curriculum as an outline and as a full curriculum, and also offered a live teacher version of it, virtually. Remember, this was in the early 2000s. This was like Skype as a video call was not really a thing then. So I don't remember how they were doing it, whether they were doing it through like ICQ or whether they were doing it through Skype calls or what. But literally, there was an online parochial pagan school. Most of their subjects were very well thought out and very secular, but like one of their years in science was an herbalism class. They did history classes around pagan themes and pagan, like they touched on all the pagan gods of various points in history and places in history. Their art history talked about God and goddess related art in various cultures one year. They ran a summer program. So, I mean, it's not like we can't have these things. We just don't. And I find myself trying to figure out why that is. Like, why? Why did all of these things just sort of go poof? It's not like we're really that different. Most of us are still here. There's more of us now than there ever was then. Is it because we're just feeling like we have enough equality, that we have the things we need? Is it that we can't get our acts together and be, like, successful? Is it that we're too busy worrying about the playtime aspects of it, about going to festivals and having a good time, and not, like, actually living as pagan folks? I know that's one thing that comes up in parenting groups a lot, like, well, how can you teach your kid to be pagan? Aren't you, like, indoctrinating them or something? And I'm like, no. That's just how our house is, right? The people who live here are pagan. The kids see that all the time. I don't know how you would actually live. It's really hard to live in the closet, right? It's harder to live in the closet when people are around you all the time and you have to put everything away. Like, I've done it, you know? And I can't imagine living that way as an adult. I have better things to do with my time than hide everything all the time. We used to talk about hospital chaplains. We used to talk about, like, talking to local hospitals so that they knew that there were people they could call if somebody wanted a chaplain. Because it turns out that to be a hospital chaplain, you have to have a 4-year degree, which pretty much leads you to Cherry Hill or possibly to the ATC. I think the ATC's degree program in their seminary would probably qualify, but Cherry Hill was set up specifically for that sort of thing. The same thing with prison ministries, but we don't talk about that very much anymore. Once in a while you hear a request for some pen pals or some books or whatever, but mostly it's just like something we don't even mention. Spiral Scouts. When Spiral Scouts started, there were like multiple groups. Spiral Scouts was the biggest one, but there was Oak Scouts in Missouri, 2 or 3 groups of them, and there was some Druid group ran a family summer camp that was all kid themed, kid appropriate, family themed. There was a heathen scouting group I guess you would call it. Like with a list of badges you could earn and how you got your awards and stuff. There were heathen groups that were also very proud of the fact that they had Boy Scout troops. I mean, which is something that a Wiccan group, you know, all of this I'm talking about in, was it 99? Covenant of the Goddess put together the Heart and Crescent Award and the Over the Moon Award to be worn on Scout uniforms, and they couldn't get it approved by the Boy Scouts. And when the Boy Scouts told them they needed to charter a certain number of troops, and they said, okay, how do we do that? We have people all over the U.S. who would do that. They were told, no, we don't really want people like you chartering troops. Well, shoot. Most of the people who are parents now don't even know that. They don't know that there is an award. They don't know the history of it. And so when people say, oh, I want to go join Boy Scouts, or as they are now, Scouts USA, and people are like, no, they're discriminatory, they don't even understand why. When they go looking for an award and find out there isn't one that's approved, they don't understand why. And I don't understand why it is that all of this historic stuff is just lost in space somewhere. It's not that old. I'm not that old. I'm really not. But these sorts of things are out there. And if we don't understand those things in our history and look around and see what's up with our community, then how are we ever going to be a successful community? Like, what is a community if we can't do any of those things? Here in Metro Detroit, we have a food pantry. It does an okay job of handling, like, emergency requests. The group that they're a part of, Pagans in Need, is based in Lansing, and they hand out food every week to people. But it's still not the same as getting the grant money that some of these churches have to run actual pantries. The Native American Community Center here keeps their bills paid because they have a jobs program. Like, they get federal grants to run a jobs program, and that's what pays for their facility. For everything else they want to do, they get money from, like, Meals on Wheels or the Area Agency on Aging or something like that. They have lunch for elders every day, but the thing that pays the bills are these grants for jobs programs. We could do that if we wanted. We could have loan funds for our businesses to help people in our community build businesses that support our community. We could, like, there are so many things that other minority groups do that we don't even talk about. And we used to. We used to talk about this shit all the time. And we used to talk about how we could build our community. And instead now, we're worried about how there are no festivals because of the pandemic. And if we had put all this time into building our communities instead of just building festivals, we would be a lot better off right now. We would have more options and more opportunities. And I don't understand why it is that we can't do that. Like, I just don't get it. I don't understand. So anyway, that's what I'm thinking about tonight. Our communities are sort of dysfunctional on a good day. And on a bad day, they're way worse than that. And I don't know how to fix it, but we should talk about how it is that we could work together to have more functional communities, that we're better at supporting people and better at meeting people's needs. Because all the things that people bring up all the time, they have been talked about and talked about and talked about. Some of them have been implemented in the past and have not had the support they needed to stay viable. So why is that? Are we just lazy? Do we have our priorities straight? I don't know. Anyway, I'm not sure who's watching, but hi there. So I've decided, by the way, as a segue into the next little bit, I've decided this fall that I am going to teach not quite a Wicca 101 class, but a more generalized Paganism 101 type class. So be looking for details for that soon. As always, if you are finding the stuff interesting that I'm talking about, feel free to check out the Ko-fi link, Ko-fi as I think of it in my brain, and send me a little donation, or post a question below for me to talk about next week, because otherwise you get to hear me ramble about whatever I feel like rambling about. And I feel like sometimes I could be way more useful, because I have a lot of knowledge on a lot of things, but, you should ask some questions. You should also go and check out paganbusinessnetwork.com. There's a great news broadcast there. Not a broadcast, but like a blog, news blog. And I'm one of the writers there, but right now we're writing about COVID and about protests for Black Lives Matter. And I will be writing more about community because, like I said, it's on my mind. And I just want to understand what's going on out there. If you have an opinion about what you think is missing in our community, by the way, message me and let me know so that I can add it to my list of things for my article. So, with that, I think I'm good for tonight. So again, if you have questions for next week, please post them or message me and I will answer away. Meanwhile, be on the lookout for new projects and go read paganbusinessnetwork.com. Talk to you later.